Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name is Julian. Sometimes the people closest to you can betray you in the most devastating way possible. And the only path to healing is to completely walk away and build something new in a different place with different people. I'd been with Belle for 3 years when I came home unexpectedly and found her in bed with my half-brother. And in that moment, she told me through tears that she'd never wanted to marry me. That she'd always wanted him. 3 years of what I'd thought was building toward a future together were revealed in an instant to be something else entirely, something I'd been too trusting or too blind to see. I grew up in a large family house in suburban Columbus with my parents and my half-brother Sam. The house was old but well-maintained, 3 stories with a finished basement, sitting on a decent-sized lot in an established neighborhood. The house had hosted generations of family gatherings and held decades of memories. Sam was my father's son from a previous marriage. His mother had passed away when he was very young. My father had remarried my mother, and I'd been born a few years later. Sam was 4 years older than me, which felt like a significant age gap when we were children, but had narrowed as we'd gotten older. We were close in childhood. Sam had been the adventurous older brother. I'd been the younger sibling who'd followed him around and tried to keep up with whatever scheme or exploration he'd been pursuing. We'd played together constantly, had shared rooms at various points, and had been genuine companions. But we grew apart during our teenage years. Our personalities diverged in ways that made connection more difficult. Sam became increasingly stubborn, charming in ways that got him out of trouble, reckless with his choices. He was the kind of person who acted first and considered consequences later, who lived impulsively and dealt with outcomes as they arose. I was different, quieter, and less interested in adventure, and the personality differences created distance between us. We weren't hostile, just separate. We lived in the same house, but occupied different worlds. Sam had his friends and his interests. I had mine. We'd intersect occasionally, but weren't close the way we'd been as children. After high school, Sam briefly attended community college, but dropped out. Worked various jobs without settling into anything long-term. When he turned 22, I was 18 at the time. He moved out of our family home. Said he wanted to live life on his own terms. He wanted freedom and independence, free of our parents' rules and expectations. I tried the same thing initially. Went away to college at Ohio State. But during my sophomore year, my parents convinced me to move back home and commute to campus instead. They made practical arguments about saving money, about how expensive dorm and apartment living were, about how I could graduate debt-free if I lived at home. I agreed somewhat reluctantly, moved back and commuted to campus for classes. It felt less independent than I'd wanted, but the financial logic was sound. Living at home during college allowed me to save aggressively. I wasn't paying rent or buying groceries. My income from my part-time job went entirely into savings. I started making small investments, built a financial foundation that most of my peers who were living independently couldn't manage. Sam visited occasionally during these years. He would stop by for holidays or random weekends when he needed something from our parents or just wanted home-cooked meals. We'd interact politely during these visits, but maintain the distance that had developed during our teenage years. I'd admired Sam's freedom in some ways. The fact that he lived on his own terms without concern for conventional paths. But I didn't envy his instability, the constant job changes, the financial struggles, the lack of clear direction or goals. I preferred my more structured approach. It might have been less exciting, but it felt more secure. After college, I got hired by a mid-sized investment firm in Columbus. Good starting salary, benefits, and career trajectory. I moved into an entry-level analyst position and started working my way up. About a year into that job, I met Belle at a corporate training program. The company sent new hires through this multi-week professional development course. We were in the same cohort, sat next to each other during one of the sessions. We started talking during breaks. Belle was immediately striking. Confident, beautiful, intelligent. We started spending time together outside the training sessions when I found out she was single. Gradually, we got to know each other much better. She told me she liked my stability, the way I listened rather than always needing to be the center of attention, my consistency and reliability. She said so many guys tried too hard to impress or were all surface with no substance. I liked her fire and ambition, her warmth when she dropped the professional persona, her intelligence and drive. We started dating officially after the training program ended. We would see each other a few times a week, gradually increased frequency as the relationship progressed. After about 4 months together, I brought Belle home to meet my parents. I was still living in the family house at this point. Had been living there for several years since moving back during college. The financial advantages had been too good to give up, even after starting my career. My parents liked Belle immediately. She was charming with them, engaged in conversation, showed interest in their lives, and made a good impression. Then, during a holiday weekend, I think it was Thanksgiving, Sam visited. He'd been gone for a while and hadn't been around much over the previous year, but showed up for the holiday with his usual casual energy. Belle met Sam for the first time that evening. He was friendly and playful with her in his characteristic way. He made jokes and teased, but not inappropriately. I noticed that Belle and Sam seemed to vibe and fell into conversation naturally. I felt a slight twinge of something. I don't know if it's jealousy or unease, but I dismissed it immediately. Sam had that effect on people. He was charismatic. It was normal for Belle to enjoy talking to my brother. Over the following months, I noticed small moments that should have concerned me more than they did. Belle would ask casually when Sam might visit again. She would bring him up in conversation more frequently. Sometimes, she would compare my seriousness to his carefree energy, noting differences between us. I'd feel uneasy when she brought him up, but I'd tell myself not to overthink it, that I trusted Belle. That Sam was my brother, even if we had different mothers and weren't particularly close as adults. The relationship with Belle continued progressing. We'd been together for about 2.5 years when I started seriously considering proposing. We talked about marriage abstractly, and both agreed we wanted to get married eventually. It felt like the natural next step. I bought a ring, planned a thoughtful proposal at a restaurant that had significance for us, asked Belle to marry me, and she said yes enthusiastically. We celebrated with champagne and excitement about planning our future together. My family was happy when I told them. My parents loved Belle and were excited about the wedding. Sam congratulated me when he heard the news, said he was happy for me. He seemed genuinely pleased. As wedding planning began, Belle and I decided she should move into the family house with me. We were getting married anyway. Living together made sense practically and financially while we saved for our own place. Belle moved in about 6 months after the engagement, took over half my bedroom, integrated into the household. My parents were welcoming. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but I noticed we started fighting more. Small arguments about wedding details, about household responsibilities, about minor irritations that shouldn't have been significant. I attributed it to wedding stress. Planning a wedding is notoriously stressful. I figured once we got through the event itself, things would settle down. I never imagined anything worse. I never let my mind go to the possibility that would eventually destroy everything. One Wednesday morning, about 8 months after Belle had moved in and about 2 months before our planned wedding date, I'd left home early for work, had an important presentation that morning, a client pitch that I'd been preparing for weeks. I was focused on making sure I had everything ready. I was close to my office, a 20-minute drive away, when I realized I'd left a vital document at home. The second piece of the presentation materials I'd spent days refining, sitting on my desk in my bedroom instead of in my bag. I turned around immediately, then drove back to the house, annoyed with myself for forgetting, but not particularly concerned beyond the inconvenience of the timing. When I pulled into the driveway, got inside, and walked upstairs to the bedroom casually, My mind was still on getting to the office on time for the presentation, on what I needed to say to the client, on making sure the rest of the morning went smoothly despite this setback. I opened the bedroom door and froze. Belle was in our bed with Sam. Both of them were partially undressed, clearly, in the middle of something that had been happening before I'd opened the door. Time seemed to stop. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. These were the two people I'd trusted most outside my parents. My fiancé and my brother. Together in bed, I'd been sharing with Belle. Belle gasped when she saw me, grabbed for sheets to cover herself. Her face went pale with shock and panic. Sam jumped up and hurriedly pulled on his pants, eyes wide with something between guilt and fear. We all just stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, with none of us speaking, all processing this moment differently. I found my voice finally, and asked Belle directly why she would do this. Why would she cheat on me? With my brother. In our bed. Belle started crying immediately. Tears were streaming down her face as she said through sobs that she'd never wanted to marry me, that she'd always wanted Sam, that she was sorry, that she didn't know how this had happened. The words were worse than seeing them together, worse than the physical betrayal. She'd never wanted to marry me, had always wanted him. Our entire relationship was reframed in an instant. She'd been with me while enjoying someone else, had accepted my proposal while loving my brother, had been planning our wedding while betraying me in the most fundamental way possible. Time slowed. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the air had been sucked out of the room. This wasn't just betrayal. This was betrayal from both sides of my life simultaneously. The woman I loved and the brother I'd grown up with. Both destroyed my trust and my future in one moment. I looked at Sam. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stood there pulling on the rest of his clothes, looking ashamed but not saying anything. I realized in that moment that nothing they could say would matter. No explanation or apology would change what had happened or what Belle had just admitted. I walked to my desk, picked up the document I'd come home for, the presentation materials that had led me to discover this, turned and walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs, out of the house. I got in my car and drove to work, sat through the client presentation like a robot, said the words I'd prepared, answered questions, functioned on autopilot while internally feeling destroyed. The presentation went fine. The client seemed satisfied. My colleagues congratulated me afterward. I felt nothing except numb shock. When I drove home that evening, I knew I couldn't stay there. Couldn't be in that house with Belle. Couldn't face my parents' questions, or my brother's presence, or any of it. I packed a bag silently, just threw essentials into luggage. I didn't organize or think carefully. Just grabbed what I needed to survive for a few days. Left the house before anyone could stop me or force a conversation I didn't want to have. Checked into a hotel. Over the next few days, I made decisions rapidly. I decided I couldn't stay in Columbus, in the same city as the people who betrayed me. I couldn't risk running into them or being pressured by family to work things out. I blocked Belle's and Sam's numbers and temporarily blocked my parents' numbers because I couldn't handle their calls and questions. I started applying for jobs in other states. Used my professional network to find opportunities far from Ohio. Even before any offer came, I gave notice at my Columbus job. I don't care how they were to do it, but I knew they had 2 weeks to replace me. I arranged movers to pack and transport my belongings. My parents were devastated by what I learned later. They tried reaching out repeatedly. They had wanted to understand what happened, had wanted to help mediate or support me, but I couldn't engage. Belle tried to reach out repeatedly through various means. Different numbers, email, social media, messages from friends we'd had in common. All of them said she needed to explain that she was sorry, that she loved me, and that she'd made a terrible mistake. I ignored every attempt, blocked every number that called more than it should, deleted every unread message. I didn't want explanations or apologies. I didn't want anything from her. Moved to Denver and focused entirely on rebuilding. I survived on my savings for a couple of weeks before I found a new, more demanding job. Even with the move, my pain didn't go away. I decided to start therapy to process the trauma. The therapist was kind and gentle, helping me work through everything without becoming permanently bitter or unable to trust. I gradually made new friends through work and activities I started doing. This helped me stop actively thinking about the heartache I was going through. Months passed. The acute pain faded into a dull ache. The constant replaying of that bedroom scene became less frequent. The anger transformed into acceptance. About a year after leaving Columbus, I reconnected with my parents. They tried to bring up what led to my disappearance, but I asked them not to talk about it. They asked if I would be coming to visit, and I told them I will soon. They were happy to learn that I am doing okay. By year 2, I felt genuinely at peace, had healed significantly, had built a life in Denver that I valued, had processed enough that I could think about my past without being consumed by rage or hurt. I started dating again cautiously. Met a woman through mutual friends at one of these casual get-togethers. She was a marketing director at an insurance company. We started seeing each other casually. The relationship with this lady developed slowly. I was cautious about getting serious, about trusting someone with my heart after what had happened with Belle. But she was patient, understanding about my history without taking my caution personally. She showed consistency and genuine care over many months. After about a year and a half together, I proposed to this new lady. She said yes. We started planning a wedding for the following year. I decided to take this new lady to see my parents. I guess Belle heard of it because 2 weeks before my wedding, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, had gotten in the habit of ignoring unknown calls. But something made me pick up. Belle's voice came through. I recognized it immediately despite not having heard it in a while. But I ended the call before she could say anything further. I felt anger rising that she'd managed to reach me after so long. The phone rang again within minutes. Same unknown number. I ignored the call and blocked the number. Then a text message arrived from yet another number. Please. I need to talk to you. It's important. More calls came over the next few days. Different numbers each time. She was clearly using various phones or apps to get around my blocks. I didn't answer any of them. Didn't read the messages beyond the preview to know they were from her. Just kept blocking and deleting. Through mutual contacts, I learned that Sam hadn't married Belle. Their relationship apparently hadn't lasted long after I'd left. They'd been together briefly, then fallen apart. Belle was apparently alone now, presumably reaching out because she'd heard that I was getting married. I also ended all communication with my half-brother, Sam. I wanted nothing to do with them. I didn't care about explanations, apologies, or whatever she thought was essential to communicate. The wedding happened without incident. Belle and my half-brother didn't show up. They didn't manage to insert themselves into the event. It was just the people we wanted there celebrating our marriage. It was a perfect day. Everything I'd wanted when I'd first gotten engaged years ago, but with the right person this time. Looking back now about 5 years since that incident, I learned that proximity creates opportunities for betrayal. That having Belle living in the same house as Sam had made their affair possible in ways that wouldn't have happened if we'd lived separately. I learned that some warning signs deserve attention. That Belle's comments about Sam, her questions about when he'd visit, her comparisons between us, all of it had been indicating her attraction. I dismissed it as harmless when it was revealing her true feelings. I learned that betrayal from multiple people simultaneously is uniquely devastating. That being betrayed by both my fiancée and my brother created a level of trauma that was harder to process than either betrayal would have been alone. I learned that sometimes the only healthy response is complete extraction. That I couldn't have healed while staying in Columbus, around reminders and proximity to the people who'd hurt me. That geographic distance was necessary for emotional healing. Most importantly, I learned that you can rebuild after a catastrophic betrayal. That the life I'd thought was destroyed in that bedroom moment was just one version of my life. I could create something different and better in a new place with new people. While my relationship with my parents has completely recovered, I've never spoken to Sam since that day and never responded to his attempts at contact. I don't know what his life looks like now and don't care. He's dead to me. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. He betrayed me in a way that permanently severed our relationship. Brielle's recent contact attempt stirred up emotions I thought were fully processed. It reminded me that healing isn't linear or complete, that you can be mostly fine and then encounter a trigger that brings everything back. But I survived it while maintaining my boundaries. After betrayal, all you have to do is survive, process, and rebuild. I've done all three successfully. That's enough, and that's victory.